All right, we are all set for this new episode. Hello, everyone. I'm your host Rohit Kokane, and if you're watching me for the first time, welcome on this particular platform. And today's episode is very special because we have a very special guest with us. And today we are going to talk about on a very interesting topic, which is power of inner knowing. And to introduce this particular topic, we have Kaushi Biddappa with us. So, Kaushi, welcome on Glitters of Life. It is pleasure to host you, and I'm very much looking forward to host this particular session, and it is going to bring great value to our viewers.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rohit. It's wonderful to know that you dedicated this episode for inner knowing. And given your own journey where you started self study, where you became the student of life at 19, that's pretty tender. And you go on to set this whole space up in the last 1.5 years. That itself is a very remarkable journey that you've been on. And I think you moved out of home at the age
Yeah,
of 16, that is 10th grade.
right.
That itself is so forthcoming, and it has a streak of exploration. And I think I see why inner knowing is so befitting, not just for me but for you as well.
Absolutely, Kaushik, because it is very important to know what we want to seek from our life and how the kind of life we want to live. So that becomes very important aspect of my life as well. And people also want to know like how they can influence, how they can explore the power of inner knowing. So we are all set for this particular journey. So Kaushik, please tell me about yourself and your work in brief so that our viewers get first-hand experience about your work as well.
Okay, so hello and hi to everybody. So, even before I get down to introducing myself, a little story about where this all started from. So, something that I watched in my workspace, and normally when I would meet people, is when you would ask them, introduce yourself, it would come down to a title. And that's really where it stops. And I recognize that people really want to know how can you add a value in their journey. And not many people have the skill and the awareness to articulate their value, market, and position themselves. And that is when I recognized not many, or rather say a very select few, embody the language of what values they embark on and what is that they want to embrace. And that's when I found being a personal brand strategist is a role that would add so much value to my journey, because I love people, I love
Yeah.
stories, and I love enabling people to live their version of success. So that's my introduction.
Great, great to know about you and your work as well. So, Kaushi, before we move ahead, I want to know like how did you start your journey as well-being advocate?
So that's a very interesting question, more so because I get to share my personal side. And something that I started to realize, and this is an observation, was how is that two people go to the same doctor and heal differently, right? And when I kind of internalized this and brought this closer home, my mom was diagnosed with a condition and an ailment in 2017. And this is not a reversible condition, it would deteriorate. And, there was only that much medical intervention can do. And I started to recognize how your emotional well being has a bearing on your physical body. And then in 2019, I kind of learned from my friend, she's dealing with terminal illness, and her health was impacted. In both of these instances, and these are very closer home examples, right? One is a parent and one is a really, really dear friend. And you realize that emotions have such a huge role to play. And culturally, our conditioning is to suppress our emotions or repress. Suppress happens very consciously, repress happens very
Yeah.
unconsciously. So we do not know how to engage with our emotions. And I think at that point in time, when I started to dig deeper and understand what does this emotion translate to in the physical world, is when I started to gain momentum in my own life. And I guess I wanted to spread and share my own awareness as to how your well being is your dharma. And I use it often. And I say dharma as in terms of that's your right.
Yeah.
And please prioritize that. And I guess that's where the truth is for me when I say being a well being advocate.
Great. So once you are practicing this well-being, it is very important to know like how do you study the well-being. So what are the factors which you consider while knowing about well-being, and any books to recommend for this particular thing?
Okay, I actually have a whole set here, and I will touch upon this. And I think the fact that you realize not many of us really sit down and communicate and engage with ourselves, because it's so easy, we find the phone, we are always on the phone, we
Yeah.
find that a very interesting engagement to do. I had to kind of discourage myself from doing that. So I replaced the phone with books, and books became my own notes, and notes became journals, journals became writing. So I think when you start recognizing that, how is your nervous system responding? Is it in the flight or fight mode, or is it in the rest and digest mode? I think when you start studying how is your body responding to emotions, the body sensations, is when you start to recognize where are you on your well-being journey. So like, for instance, it's not like I practice all of this and I'm not sick. It's not like I don't deal with challenges with my body. I do. In fact, I find it strange when people say, "Oh, you practice meditation, etc. How can you be sick?" And I really sit down to think. So it's not like you're not going to deal with ailments in your life. Your body is going to go through an aging process. But how do you bounce back? How do you respond to the challenges? Makes that life and energy much more meaningful. I think that's where well being sits with me.
Yeah, great. So, what are the names of those books which one should read, and so that they can have this particular great learnings from them? So, any recommendation of book names?
Yes, 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 yes. I was thinking I would get to it at the end, but I'm glad you asked
Okay.
at the beginning, but I'm ready for it. So, something about the whole thing, this is the book, You Can Heal Your Life. And I think a lot of them are already aware of Louisa Hay. She's done extensive work in the space of how emotions speak a particular language and how it shows up on your body. I find this very beautiful because you start to recognize your internal dialogue matters so much. And in
Okay.
fact, this is the book I started reading to understand how the subconscious mind comes into play.
Mhm.
And so, if you don't believe, that there's no way that you will get into action mode. And so, it's the belief that drives a lot of these decisions and actions. So, this is Louisa Hay, and that is You Can Heal Your Life.
Okay.
I wish I had written all these books, but you know what? Why reinvent the wheel? I can recommend books. Now,
You're on that particular journey as well.
yes, you're right. And this is another interesting book by an Indian author, Rohini Singh. And the title is The Only Way Out is Within. And this book came into my life. And I have to tell you this, there's a little backstory to how I started reading books. I struck a communion with God saying, whenever I hit a wall in any space in my journey, will you show up as books in my life? Because I want to have that communication going. And I think that's when, you surrender and, you're working with faith. You're working along with faith.
Yeah.
Honestly, Rohit, I've had books just show up. People ask me, how do you pick books? And yeah, this is how I pick books. So that's the secret there. And this book, I get this book. So I quit my corporate career on August 14, 2019. I go to a restaurant, which is August 15th. It's Independence Day. It's all that event. And I find this book at that restaurant. And I knew I couldn't borrow this book. So I keep visiting the restaurant,
Okay.
keep reading these pages. And then I finally found the version for myself. And this one gets detailed understanding of each of the emotions. And it kind of got me a sense of, in the level of consciousness, and if you go by the scale of David Hawkins, you have fear, guilt, shame. All of this is low vibrational. So you could practice kindness and you could practice gratitude, which is high vibrational, but you're holding on to resentment. Guess what? Your vibration's only going to drop down. And people don't realize this. People think, oh, I'm practicing kindness and practicing
Yeah.
gratitude. I'm set. But you hold on to so much resentment. You're not willing to let go of the past. You're letting guilt play constantly. I mean, guilt is an interesting emotion, but you need to allow it to capitalize into action and where you benefited. So, from that standpoint, I find this book very beautiful. Now, this is interesting too because this book traveled with me to Varanasi, and
Okay.
and that's why I'm really I get excited to see this book. And this is by the author Alka Dillon, and it's called The Om Factor. And what do I like about this book is, with all due respect to who speak about leadership, sit at the table, I just feel that so much gets dismissed on how you hold, conversations at home. Like most of the women, and I'll give you examples in my own journey of people who hold very strategic roles, Rohit, but at home they're docile, they don't know how to speak up for their needs, and guess what? It impacts your emotional well-being. It shows up as ailments, it shows up as disease. I often use the word disease as discomfort in the body. So I just find understanding the deeper essence of who you are and not undermining your needs is so important. So from that standpoint, this is beautiful. And Cash Flow. This
Yeah.
is by Robert Kiyosaki. And what is very wonderful is we speak personal development, etc., etc. But the minute we speak the language of money, we are like hesitant, we are uncomfortable. We think like, no, money means greed. Money means, no, that's really not us. But it's so important to understand how expansive you got to be about understanding money as a resource. And I found this very beautiful, which is the quadrants, which is the employee, business owner, self-employed, and investor. Because you realize we think I'll quit job and start working on my own, and you're on your entrepreneurial journey. But there's so much that happens and needs to change at a core level. People don't get this. People understand this as concepts, but there's not much internalization happening. So from that standpoint, I think this is a highly recommended book because money is an important resource as well, and energy. And now, since we're speaking well-being, this is something that came as a surprise element to me. And in fact, people says, Kaushi, you didn't know you were an empath. And I'm like, no, I mean, I didn't think of it that deeply. So something that I watched over the COVID era was when people would call and talk about their grief and discomfort, I would feel it in my body. Like somebody's feeling discomfort in their leg, I'm feeling it. I had picked on the
Yeah.
energy of people and I didn't know how to differentiate. And it struck me then at that moment saying, Kashi, being kind does not mean you have to bend backwards and burn yourself down. You can be there for people, but how are you going to protect and shield your energy? And I found the Empath Survival Guide extremely meaningful. So, from a well being standpoint, from an emotional well being standpoint, I just thought these were important parameters for us to address. And that is why I chose to share these books with you.
Great. I'm just loving this conversation because it is offering me a great value. And also, the viewers who are watching us and who will be watching on a later point of time,
Yeah.
you'll be surely enjoying this particular conversation because it holds value. And the kind of books you have shared, those are very filled with value. So one can just give a rate to them, not just because Kaushi has shared it, but yes,
Yeah.
they have got a lot to tell about our way of loving or living life. Yeah.
Yes.
So you also talked about having those challenges in life. So do you think that practicing well-being is also related to addressing challenges? So if you have challenges, how do you address those?
So I would speak about myself, and I started to realize the body is always communicating with you. Okay. And it starts with offering cues. And when you start studying body scan meditation, I think this is very important to set the premise right at the beginning. Meditation does not mean you have to sit in the lotus position.
Yeah.
You can sit anywhere and understand the pace and the rhythm at which you're breathing. What is your natural pace? And slow down to understand where are you feeling the discomfort and start with your feet and go up to your head. We don't do that. And when you continue to do this over a period of time, there is communication happening and that gets strengthened. So I realize if I'm stressed or I'm feeling overwhelmed, I could either have a migraine or a sinus attack, or I could feel stress in my neck and shoulder.
Okay.
And at the physical aspect, it's like the inflammation of the body, etc., etc. But at the deeper level, when I go into and dig deeper, the emotional angle is I'm resisting. So, and when you dig deeper, in my case, and I can only speak for myself, I want to move and make progress at a certain pace. And guess what? I'm not making that progress. And how am I measuring myself? Based comparing myself with others. And then when you have this dialogue with yourself, what are your thoughts telling you? Thoughts are the language of the mind. Your feelings are the language of the body. When you start realizing that they're communicating and you're in tuned into it, you realize, how do you respond to that? And I think that is where it comes down to practicing and understanding your body and working with your body's intelligence. And I think this is something that we could all start practicing, because, and I think it got into me as a more amplified effort, is because during the COVID era, you realize you can't get to a doctor when you need to, but you're still dealing with conditions which are physical in nature that needs addressal. Now, I will never discourage you from going to a doctor or an
Yeah.
expert. It's much needed. But what is that you can do in the interim is to start understanding and working with your body's intelligence. I think that is where the essence of well-being comes into play.
Right, because we all do have challenges and we have to face those challenges. Even I follow a kind of approach because each and every day comes with a challenge. So it is not that we are going to live to the fullest of that particular day, but it is the kind of approach we will be following. Because see, challenges can come in any way. There is no such particular way that we will be addressing those challenges. But the kind of reaction we are giving to that particular moment or situation matters a lot for me, because in earlier days of my life I was pretty like overwhelming myself just because with the reaction time I used to respond very fastly. But then I slow down my pace. I just reacted with the emotions, reacted with it by taking that particular time, and now it has become a very casual process for me. I'm saying casual just because I'm used to it right now. So I take time for
True,
reacting.
true, true,
Yeah,
true.
I take time for reacting. I understand the situation. I understand the perspective. Then it becomes very important for me because it is not just about me. It is the kind of a person who I'm been interacting with, or the kind of reaction they want from me. So if we are taking time for reacting, then it can become very easier for all of us, and then we can face challenges accordingly. The kind of leverage we have with our emotions, so it becomes very easy for that case. Okay, now
May I just
yeah,
add to what you said? And I think you bring a very interesting point, Rohit. It's about delaying your response time. And I think, what is very meaningful in this journey is for me to follow the work done by some really great people. And I want to cite Joe Dispenza's work, and he talks extensively from the space of neuroplasticity. And I think we all have habits and it's ingrained in us. And I really like this insight where 95% of our behaviors are memorized set of behaviors,
yeah,
which means you're acting subconsciously most of the time. That insight was very valuable. Another very interesting insight that I really picked on recently was one of our connections on LinkedIn wrote about this very insightful note which
okay,
says, at any given point in time, you are only present for 3 seconds. So,
yeah,
can you imagine? This is your present moment, and you're only there for 3 seconds. And then you're either in the future or in the past. So, when we start practicing mindfulness, you're just expanding that range. And a lot of people say, be in the now. I actually want to tell myself, are you really in the now? I think another thing that we can all start practicing is not just pick concepts and use them and have an intellectual dialogue around it, but internalize. I think that's when change happens. And you don't have to change the world, just go and work on yourself. It has a ripple effect. It has a ripple effect. And I think, yeah, and you brought a very valuable point there on how you worked on your responses.
yeah, absolutely. So thank you for sharing that perspective as well, because it is very much needed. If you have multiple perspective, then it becomes easier to address which can offer a great benefit, so
True.
one can decide. Yeah, now my next question is like, how to be the architect of our life, and do you think that belief plays an important part of it?
So that is a very interesting question, because I think when I started to understand, a lot of us live lives by chances, okay? Not so much by the design of how we want it happening. And there's so much focus on how, you know, how do we want to design a life based on success and accomplishments because someone else defined it for us. But how do we live in alignment is something that is very important and
Yeah,
valuable. And I started to learn this. And my healer says this very beautiful thing: when you start living in alignment is when you attract abundance. And I'm just going to let that thought stay there. Alignment and you attract abundance. And when you dig a little deeper, you realize life is nothing but a series of decisions. And you never know if you made the right decision, but
Huh.
guess what? You get better with making decisions. And when you know that life is series of decisions, you realize that it starts with the quality of questions you ask yourself. And this is something that's very, very important. So the two beliefs that really is the premise and the crux and the foundation of who I am is, are you asking yourself better questions, Kaushi? And what is the quality of your breath? So at any given point in time, Rohit, if I'm feeling an imbalance, I've told myself, go back and understand, what is your breath rate? What is the rhythm? How are you pacing yourself? And that kind of brings me back into my anchor moment. Because at the end of the day, what are you without breath?
Like,
Seriously, nothing. And then it gets me to the question like, if you know you're dying, how are you going to live life? And the COVID era has really taught me, and I think we watch death at such close proximity
yeah,
and families being disrupted because of loss of life. It's not a comfortable space for us to be in. Grief as an emotion is not something that we've coached ourselves on. We do not know how to work with grief as an emotion. And I think that's something that we must consider focusing on, so that we know we'll treat it like any other emotion. So, yeah. So, for me, it boils down to life is a series of decisions. Are you making empowering decisions? And what beliefs drive those decisions?
absolutely. So you said an important point about designing our life. It is not just about the choices we make, but it is about the kind of design we have for our life. And also asking the right questions really help. So I want to ask, like, what kind of questions do you ask yourself?
So, something that I think is very important is with the body scan, right? I start like, if I'm engaging with someone, how am I feeling? If I hear a certain word, how is my body responding? Like, there are certain words that trigger a certain emotion in me, and I don't feel comfortable about it. And I'm not
Yeah,
avoiding it, but I'm understanding, oh, that's a trigger. And I started to recognize myself, in which events do I get triggered? What kind of people do I engage with to trigger a certain emotion in me? And at the end of the day, life is also about the meaningful relationships that you nurture.
absolutely.
And I think that's so important to understand. So the question is, in this company right now, am I feeling elevated or am I feeling believed? If I'm feeling believed, what is that message that I need to figure out in this process? That's something which has been really, really helpful. Like, how is my energy responding when I'm around people?
Very well said, because it is kind of a energy that reflects on people. So it becomes very important that we have the kind of a vibrant energy, so that people get to know us in a better way, and they have the positive vibe which is coming from us. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think,
And
adding on to that, as an empath, it becomes even more prominent and a very pronounced effort, because otherwise, guess what? It's so easy to pick on low vibrational energy and feel the drain.
yeah,
Why would you do that to yourself? Yeah.
absolutely. By this time, Kaushi, we have been interacting. I have been enjoying this particular conversation. So, if I have to ask you that, why is it important to connect with people? Why is it important to have that conversation with people? So, is it all about personal branding, or it is just about having the another perspective which you would like to share on this particular question?
This goes back to my belief, and one of the in the belief set, one of the beliefs is, engage with people, and engage with people who have a very diverse background. And the more diverse your network is, the greater the learning. And see, the interesting part is, when you meet people, you're also learning through those exchanges. So we need to understand that the relationship currency plays a very important role in our journey. And if I were to tie it back to our careers, so your work will do the talking, you will do the broadcast, but someone has to do the recommendation. Who will speak for you when you're not in the room? That becomes a very important part of the relationship building exercise, and which is why we get down to managing and nurturing meaningful relationships. So yeah, that's where it is.
Great, because we have been connected on social media or through social media, so it becomes important that what kind of relationship we are establishing, what kind of community we are building, because there are a lot of people who are having those diverse thoughts, as you said, and it becomes important to find the right tribe, because once we have that particular community around us, it offers a greater learning, and then it is how we grow. So yeah, thank you for sharing that perspective. Now coming on onto the last part, like if you are talking on the platform which is called Glitters of Life, so once you hear about this particular name, Glitters of Life, what thought comes into your mind?
The first thing that comes to my mind is don't dim your light.
Yeah.
And if I were to extend this, it's about own your brilliance. And it resonates immensely with me as we're always trying to diminish ourselves, play small, because we want to fit into somebody's mold and somebody's expectation or somebody's imagination of who we are. And we never bring our whole self. And I think that's where it becomes very important to understand the essence of who you are. And I think who you are is about your being and your becoming. And a huge part of that is, again, going back to understanding how much of your behaviors are in autopilot mode.
Yeah.
Is this behavior helping you? If this behavior helped you in the past, will it serve you in the future? That self study would really help. And I've spent time on your platform, I tuned into some of those interviews, and
Yeah.
everything goes back to how you become the change agent. How do you leverage your strengths, play to your strengths? If there are challenges that you're dealing that can stall your growth, how do you ensure it does not overshadow your strengths? So that's what Glitters of Life means to me.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that as well, because I'm loving it. I just get to know myself better through this perspective, and I can just surely improve on whatever aspects you told about this particular platform. So, thank you for saying those kind words. And if you have to say anything in the end, please do the honors, so that our listeners, our viewers get value through that one sentence or one word.
I think I would just want to remind each one of them that your well being is your dharma. Let your self love be so strong that even if you don't receive validation, you still continue to love yourself, which means you have a healthy self esteem. Always believe in yourself, even if others believe and you don't believe in yourself, there's very little change that you can do. I really like the statement where they said that you can have the greatest talents in the world, but
Yeah.
if you don't believe in yourself, nothing really can be achieved. And then surrender, which I think gets down to this wonderful line from the scriptures, Bhagavad Gita, saying that, you have the right to do your duties, but you're not entitled to the fruits of your action. So, yeah, that's my parting message.
Yes, we just have to keep going and going. We just have to play our part, and the universe will always reward us with the better things. So, Kaushi, thank you for sharing all your perspective, all your value, and it was great episode. Interacting with you was a pleasure, and I hope this offers a great value to all our viewers. And I'm really thankful to you. So, if anyone wants to connect with Kaushi, she is rightly available on LinkedIn. You can just consume her post, and you can you can churn out the value from her. And she is always curious to know about our journey as well, so she will be offering you a well guidance in this personal branding as well. So yes, that was all from this particular episode. Thank you so much, Kaushi.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And you just made it so crisp and short because I do believe the audience is always time starved and you want to get to them soon.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you everyone for watching this particular episode. I'll be coming back with the new and exciting episodes very soon. Until then, bye bye, take care, stay happy and stay healthy.
Thank you.